What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. As CEOs, we all know how important it is to manage our customer data. I mean, collecting it and managing it. We pay teams to do that, and we need that information. But it's even more important to get the intelligence out of that data, right? Get all the information about those customers that's useful to us and turn that into action, because that's when we can really increase sales. And I'm really happy to have Michael Katz on the show today to talk to us about his company, mParticle, and how he started it and how they manage customer data to pull out that intelligence. So, welcome, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alice. Great to be here.
Tell us just a little bit about what mParticle does.
Yeah, so we are a customer data platform. We ultimately help our customers unify all of their customer data from the various touch points that they have with their consumers. So maybe mobile apps, websites, point of sale systems, connected TV apps, anywhere where customer data is created as a result of the interactions between their owned and operated properties and the end consumer. And so solving a lot of the technical challenges around bringing that data together, organizing it, helping our customers make sense of it. So understanding the why behind the what and continually improving their context about their customer, and then making it really easy to operationalize that data. So supporting a large ecosystem of great marketing and analytics partners that we can disseminate data to on behalf of our customers, and just make it really easy to unlock the value that would otherwise get trapped.
The value is so important, right? So, we're organizing the data to make it useful, right? So we can actually take action with it and it has value to us. I can't tell you how many companies I run into, Michael, that have so much data laying around that no one's using. It's, I, what are we doing with all this data, right? We actually have to make it actionable. And I think in the case of increasing sales, which, of course, every CEO wants to do, they need to be able to tap that valuable data. And so I believe you saw a great need for this, and that's what had you found this company. But let's roll back to what were you doing right before this? Now, I know you are a serial entrepreneur and you had a great adventure with Interclick also. So start us on the short story there and then tell us what prompted you to start mParticle.
Yeah, well, I found myself in an industry that I probably never imagined that I would be in, which was advertising, and more specifically like digital advertising, and got introduced to some opportunities that then evolved into what became Interclick. And I think the thing that made us unique and special and differentiated and ultimately valuable was the data platform that we
Mm.
built. And so really grew a strong appreciation for how teams, and more specifically marketing teams, want to and need to use customer data to drive campaign results, and at the end of the day, like business results. So we had a good run. We went public. I was the youngest CEO on Nasdaq for a little bit, which was always kind of cooler to say than it was to do. Being a public company CEO is definitely stressful. And then we got bought by Yahoo back in 2011. So I stayed at Yahoo for about a year and saw the world evolving. And you get to this point where you're like, should I not build something? What am I going to do next? And the opportunity that presented itself just became too great and too exciting to ignore. So that's ultimately what became mParticle, and we've been pursuing. The interesting thing is, like, at Interclick, we didn't really have a vision. Like, we just kind of like figured it out as we went, and then we knew we knew how to leapfrog the competition when the time was right. Whereas with mParticle, we started with a very kind of big, bold vision from day one, and we've been executing to that vision, for really the past 10 years. And so while the articulation of the opportunity has obviously gotten much better over the course of time, the thing that we set out to do back in 2013 is exactly what we're doing still to this day, which is pretty cool.
So what was that? And what sparked it, right? Like what made you think, "Oh my gosh, I have to do this." What was the thing that you had to do?
Yeah, well, there's been a number of seismic kind of technology shifts or platform shifts. One of them was the rise of mobile, right? So you had, prior to the App Store coming into prominence, um, you had a single threaded digital experience, right? Like you either went to somebody's website or you didn't. Um, and with the rise of mobile, then there was websites, there was native apps, and we saw this like IoT trend growing. So there would be apps across a series of connected devices. This is 2013, so not like in again in hindsight fairly obvious, but then we had to make some bets, and we felt like just looking at our own behavior as people, as consumers, just spending more and more time on our phones, and on our phones downloading apps because it was just a better experience. It was faster, more seamless, better user interfaces, right? And so we felt like if we could solve the technical challenges inside mobile app environments, we'd be well positioned for whatever would come next, because it would probably look a lot more like that than it would the browser. Whereas you have these legacy solutions, who are kind of big established companies, the problem was they were tethered to an architecture that was kind of quickly becoming outdated. Everything was based on like pixels and cookies and things like that. And so we felt like if we could move people to a much more durable, scalable uh, setup where everything was API based and API first, we felt like no matter what happened from there, we'd be in a strong position.
So mParticle was born out of that.
It was, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, no, the thing I would say is like we felt like mobile, while a great opportunity, was never the end game. Mobile was always the setup for multi-channel, because we felt like if we could solve the mobile data challenges, we could solve kind of any of the data challenges.
Right.
Um, and then as we started to solve the multi-channel data challenges by building out capabilities around like data quality and data governance to solve for like this ever increasingly complex, like privacy uh, setup that we all have to deal with. We felt like that would be a really important setup for what would come next, and what would come next would be intelligence and automation, and helping our customers ultimately become more strategic using the platform, and having to do kind of less manual configuration.
So when you first started mParticle, who was your audience? Was it similar to your audience at Interclick or a different audience? And how did you find them and how did you go to market?
Yeah, great question. Very, very different. So at Interclick, we sold primarily to ad agencies who would
Right.
plan and buy media on behalf of their customers. And look, like every now and again, if we became like a prominent partner for a team at an agency, we get to meet the client. Like most notably, I think Subaru was one of our biggest customers, and became good friends with a bunch of people over there and got close to them. But the primary channel was selling to ad agencies, and admittedly, like I was never really a fan of that. I wasn't like a huge fan of the that kind of go to market, and so part of the appeal of starting a company like mParticle was that it gave us the opportunity to sell directly to the end stakeholder, the people that were having the problems or needed to solve for certain outcomes very directly. And yeah, getting that first initial traction. Look, we configured the company in a way. So I raised money from a bunch of angel investors and um, some seed funds and some like early stage investors. But I wanted as many people early on the cap table as possible because we had this kind of big bold vision, and we couldn't necessarily do like the lean startup thing. So we weren't going to be able to like iterate our way there to some sort of MVP. Like we needed to build a lot of technology. So we started the company with like our 10 best engineers from Interclick, and it was just like hit the ground running. I'm not going to hire any sales partnerships BD people. I'm going to use my cap table and the people that are on my cap table as like my extended BD team.
Yeah. Gosh, that is so important. And I think that a lot of times we forget to use the people who we know and who love us already, right? They've invested our money in us. They're our friends and family. They're other business connections that we have. Like, why would you do it the hard way? But so many companies start out and, they build these lists and they do these cold approaches. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What about the people we know?
Right. Yeah.
Let's go talk to them. And that, like you said, building that large cap table or building a board or even just an advisory council of people who can make introductions and walk you in the door. So it sounds like that's how you started. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean that was the ripple that ultimately created the wave. We needed to get in front of a lot of big brands, and I felt like the people that I was letting invest in the company were people that could ultimately open doors for us. Now it was on us to be able to do something with that, but I wanted to be able to catalyze that, like the kind of cold start nature of starting a new company, because that's always the toughest part, right? Like the
Yeah.
starting from a standing start is not easy.
I think that CEOs really need to take that under advisement, right? It's like, think about the people you're surrounding yourself with, whether you're just starting 10 years in, 20 years in. You've got a lot of connections who know people. You can, again, build a board, build an advisory council, or again, when you're letting investors in, whether it's early stage or later stages, think about not just their money, think
Yeah.
about their connections, because so many times the connections are worth many millions more than the actual millions that they invested originally.
Oh my God, absolutely. And like, something I always recommend to first time startup CEOs who are building like a B2B company. I think it's a little bit different if you're pursuing like a consumer thing,
Yeah.
but it's like sometimes you get people and they're trying to optimize for having as few people on the cap table as possible, and just like walking them through, like you want to have as many people who have a strong vested interest in your success,
Yeah.
almost to the extent that you do, because it's a force multiplier.
Absolutely. A strong vested interest in your success is a force multiplier. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you didn't have to go out and hire a sales team. You had people could make introductions, and then I'm assuming you went in and did the selling.
To start, yeah, because I
Hmm.
needed to understand the dynamics of like the sales process. Eventually, we knew that we did need to hire a few salespeople, and the thing is, like coming from a totally different industry, even though it was like adjacent, like I mentioned before, the go to market motions were very different. So, admittedly, like I didn't know what good looked like, and so we had hired three different types of sellers. We hired one person was like he's like the industry executive. He had been more at like big companies. One person was she was like the outgoing, kind of very friendly, higher energy type, and
Right.
then we had this other guy who was kind of just like a well-rounded kind of athlete. He had like the little bit of business development experience, a little bit of sales experience. He was young. He knew the
Yeah.
players in like, the New York tech ecosystem, and we just like I just kind of like set them on their course and tried to help each one along the way. And I knew that most likely um, all three were probably not going to be what we needed at that time because of how different their backgrounds were. Like if they were great, then more power to us.
Yeah.
But I'd assumed that at least one, if not maybe two, would work out. And it ends up kind of turning out like the last person that I mentioned, the athlete with, high EQ, high IQ, um, decent network. He was he worked out. He was with us for a few years before starting his own company, which has been successful. And yeah, it's at some point though, you have to say like, do I know exactly the
Yeah.
the profile of the seller that I need? And if you don't, then you almost kind of have to run an experiment. And that was my approach.
And you did, and I love that. And you look, most founders start out selling, right? They have to. We do founder-led sales, and it is simply the best way to do it if you're leveraging your network the way you were, because people are introducing you, and then you go in and you're listening and you're learning. So you hear what the customers want and what they're saying, and you're kind of building what's going to come next when you do hire salespeople. So you know a few things before you start hiring those salespeople, and you know
Yeah.
how the sale is going to go a little bit, right? And then, hiring the first salespeople is always hard. It's always difficult because we think maybe we want somebody just like us, or we think, oh, we should get somebody who knows a lot about sales. They've come from industry, they've been at those big companies. Yeah. So we think about that. And I love what you did making an experiment. And I do always recommend when hiring the first salespeople, whether your company is young or old, if you're starting something new, always hire at least two so you can benchmark against them, right? And don't hire two identicals. You did exactly what I advise. Hire some different kinds of people and put them in the role, support the heck out of them and see how they do, right? And then that will help you learn what's going to come next. Because going from founder led sales to seller led sales is tough. And no one is ever going to be able to break down barriers and get into companies the way somebody with a title of founder or CEO can. No seller has the ability to do that, right?
Of
But
course.
if you stay in that founder led role, but morph just a little bit to still be out there using your network, generating leads, but then turning them over to the sellers, right? It's a
Mhm.
lot smoother. It works a lot better. It's interesting. So tell me a little bit more about how you set these salespeople up. So you have these very three different, backgrounds, which is great, great test. Did you give them a list and have them go out and cold call? Did you ask them to use their own networks? Did you do a combination? Did you feed them leads? How did you get them started?
Yeah, I mean, so this is early days mParticle. It was pretty wild wild west. I mean, it was like, hey, let's game plan together on like what we think a good account could look like. I had started to build a little bit of traction on my own, um, and as we started to do PR and get a bunch of attention, leads would also come in, and it was like, well, and at this point we have a fraction of the product that we have now.
Right.
So
And remind me, who were you having them sell to? Were they just like Fortune 500? Were they like describe the companies they were trying to reach out to?
yeah, well, in the early days, like we were built for like the mobile data challenge and solving SDK fatigue and the pain around marketing teams requesting deployment of kind of client side data trackers, and the tax and the overhead that creates within like the engineering department. And so it wasn't necessarily just like Fortune 500. It was like just open up your phone, look to see who the top apps are, and let's
Okay.
go after that.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so that was pretty pretty easy because it was a set, here's a set of,
Totally.
companies we're going to go after and we could find them. So they did that. Did you set them up geographically, vertically? How did you decide, who should go after which companies?
In the earliest of days, no. I mean, it was just again, like it
Wild,
was
wild west. Yeah.
a free for all. Yeah, for sure. Um, over the course of time, that obviously has to change, right? I
Right.
think it probably took us 2 years or so before we got to a place where we said, okay, we have to bring some order to the chaos.
All right. So take us from there. How did you build the order from the chaos? You knew a bit about sales from your last company. I don't know. I should have asked you earlier, but were you in a sales role before you started your first company?
No, no. I was in management consulting. I worked for Accenture and
Okay.
a couple other companies, and I didn't know the first thing about sales. I had to figure it out at my first company, and it's what's interesting. I think at both Interclick as well as mParticle, there was a pretty steep learning curve, at least to start. But as that learning curve started to flatten out, the growth curve started to accelerate.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of inverse relationship. Um, I didn't know how to think about like an enterprise sales motion. I've never been a sales leader. I'm not like kind of classically trained in anything. I'm just like an entrepreneur who can do a little bit of a bunch of things halfway decent enough to then go and fire myself and hire somebody much better and smarter to own it. Um, and so we had hired our first head of sales because I was like, I don't do this. Like I need somebody else who specializes in this to do this. Um, but I feel like in looking back at like a 20-year entrepreneurial career, the times where I've probably screwed up the most are when I don't take the time up front to understand, like truly deeply understand the problem
Mm.
and the required solution before I pass it off to somebody or I outsource it. And that doesn't mean everything needs to pass through me, but it means that like I need to understand what it's like solving for whatever before I start to think like, well, what's the right type of person that I need to own this? And like what we've seen with sales is like there's a lot of false positives. There's a lot of people who are really impressive on paper. I mean, salespeople are good at selling,
Right.
and so they can sell themselves in the interview, and you have to be able to kind of cut through a lot of that, and it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And you're right. Salespeople do sell themselves. And
Yeah.
we need lots of good ways to figure out who is really going to sell. And, I always say, not only do I need to know if you can sell, I need to know if you will sell, because a lot of people can tell you exactly what they will do or should do, but they don't actually do it. Right. So if you've got both of those when you're hiring sellers, I use some different assessments to try to help determine that with my clients because it is hard. And I think, that transition again, like you said, from founder led sales to the next level to, oh my gosh, it's the wild, wild west and there's a lot of chaos. We've got to move beyond this. And that growing pain that happens, it's necessary, right? I mean, you can shortcut it sometimes if you find someone who does know how to put it together and helps you at an early stage. But usually at that stage, you're not paying, highly paid consultants to help you figure stuff out. So you have that grit to dig in there and go after it. But I love what you said about the times when it didn't go well is because you didn't get the opportunity to think through thoroughly before you decided what type of person you need. And I think in this world where we are always trying to go fast, sometimes we just go too fast. And as a CEO, we think, well, there is somebody out there who knows this better than me. I'm just going to hire that person and they're going to do it and it's going to be great. And then it's not great. And you're like, what happened? I thought I hired this great marketer, or I hired this great sales leader and it did not work out. It's like, what did I miss? It's
Mhm.
exactly what you said. You didn't understand it enough. Not that you have to be an expert in it, but it
Exactly.
really helps if you do it a little bit, right, yourself and understand it enough to go, oh, this company where we are right now, understanding this problem the way that I do, this is probably what we need.
Yeah,
And it sounds
absolutely.
like that's what you were doing.
Yeah, completely. I think if I'm being honest, um, I didn't I didn't know sales, and so I wanted to just like outsource my fear of the unknown
Right.
onto somebody else and just say like I can't deal with this. This is, I wasn't like having this conversation, but I think like subconsciously I was saying this is a lot. This is scary. I don't know the first thing about this. Let me bring
Right.
somebody else in.
99% of the founders that I talk with felt the same way, like, "I don't know sales, let me get somebody who does," right?
Yeah, yeah, and so I think it's a fear-based reaction is kind of what I've come to appreciate. But the other thing I'll say, for having done this for 20 years, nobody learns anything when like everything is going well, right? Like you learn during the struggle. Like there's beauty in the struggle.
There
So I'm
is. There
forever
there
grateful.
there truly is beauty in the struggle. I know it's hard to believe it when we're in it, but there truly is beauty in it, and I think we come out ahead when we think through things, and yeah, it's just slow down to speed up. I don't know what else to say. It's an old saying, but it's so true. Sometimes you just have to sit and think about it a little bit. All right, so you got past the wild, wild west, and you moved forward, and you started hiring salespeople because you told me you have 20 salespeople, so now I know you grew your sales organization. So
Mhm.
let's talk about moving from there to, kind of up to where you are now. How did you start building that sales organization? What structure did you decide to use? Was it, a geographical or a vertical? Was it just direct sellers? You mentioned you have some channel in there too. So tell us about how you started to form that sales organization and really grow your sales.
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing to do is probably to grow it out regionally, right? So we started the company headquartered in New York, built out a team of a few sellers to cover the East Coast out of New York City. We eventually opened a West Coast office in San Francisco, and then we wanted to go to Europe. So eventually ended up hiring a GM out there to stand up a sales team in London to sell into the European market. Um, and then kind of more recently, we've done the same with APAC. So establishing a presence first and foremost in Sydney, but also in Singapore and India as well. And so I think the regional alignment is easiest. It may be most cost effective too, and everybody's trying to obviously save as much money as we all can these days. Um, but I think that if I had to do it over, just given the fact that look, we're one of the companies that I think is widely credited with creating this category of customer data platforms. We like predate the CDP acronym and the customer data platform moniker. Um, and in these emerging markets, as you start to see success doesn't happen like all over the map. It happens in pockets.
Right.
And so I do think that while a lot of companies will start regional and then go vertical, and the one thing that you don't want to do is kind of keep flip-flopping. You can really only kind of do that once. I do think that starting vertically, if you're in an emerging market, is the right move.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. So you built it out regionally,
Yep. Yep.
and you have direct sellers living in their region so they can go visit customers. And what other kinds of things do they do in their region? Do they hold any kind of client conferences regionally, or what kinds of things are they doing?
I mean, yeah, the short of it is like kind of have to do it all, right? Because if you're not, somebody else is, and it's like out of sight, out of mind, right? So there's the direct selling, there's the putting on kind of local events, right? Maybe it's happy hour or like a meetup or whatever it could be. Get some good speakers, content,
Yeah.
host a dinner, whatnot. But create a draw ultimately, like bring the right people into a room, and I feel like if you're able to do that and do that in like a fun, intimate environment with high quality people, everybody kind of feeds off of that energy, and we've always been pretty successful doing that. But it requires tight coordination between sales and partnerships, who works with like our solutions and technology partners, marketing, obviously.
Mhm.
There's usually a need for like executive support. um, I think it brings me to like a really important point, something that I've learned over the course of time. I think this is, we've had multiple points during mParticle's trajectory where like we grew a bunch and then we kind of hit our heads on the ceiling, and then we had to kind of like dig through the muck so that we could grow again, and then like the same thing, kind of like rinse and repeat. um, and in 2019 we ran into some growing pains, and after digging in, like being forced to dig in finally, um, I walked away with the strong appreciation that sales, like any other function, and like companies, like sales is just a system. It's a
Yes.
system of integrated, interconnected, hopefully tightly aligned parts that hopefully produces an output that is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
And the alignment between how information is gathered and analyzed and disseminated with proper incentive structures and training and enablement. Everything has to be in sync, right? And if it's not, and I feel like the times where we've seen growth and then we need to figure something out, like we outgrow some of those things that we're doing. It could be a comp plan, it could be um, how we assign accounts, it could be our content marketing strategy, like whatever it may be. And one thing starts to get out of alignment, and the misalignment gets magnified and amplified throughout the entire system. So you're constantly having to, my mental model is that like you're constantly having to um, fine tune the dials on the.
Yes. Yes. And I'll tell you, if you're not doing that fine tuning, you're failing. And I see it all the time. Marketing, all of a sudden they're not generating any leads. What happened? Okay. We've got to change what we're doing. The prospecting of the salespeople has become ineffective.
Yeah,
Got to change what we're doing. But companies are not. They're doing more of the same
yeah,
instead of figuring out a better or different way. And that, it's like agile comes to mind, right? The word, it's very important to be agile. You have to see, oh my gosh, this is starting to not work. We need to think of something new to do. We can continue this while we're thinking of something new, but we need to be able to switch pretty quickly and
yeah.
get out of that mode, which I think people just don't do fast enough. So, and
Well, you're
it's
overcoming.
ongoing,
Yeah, you're overcoming human bias, right?
right?
To double down on the things that got you to the place that you're at, and
Yeah.
letting go of those things, especially when you combine that with like human ego,
Yes.
is really tough for some people, especially when you're a successful startup, and some of the early people that you hired, who were doing a bunch of heavy lifting and doing it a very specific way, contributed so much to the success, and they started to grow and they got promoted, and they were like, okay, this is my thing, this is my shtick. And it takes a lot to be able to kind of manage your own emotions and say, what got me from point A to B isn't going to get me from B to C. I have to continue to reinvent the role that I'm in. And my view is like, the role, if we take this like systems mindset, the role doesn't belong to the person. The role belongs to the company. the person occupies the role.
100%. Such a great way of looking at things, and thanks for bringing that to the forefront, because as you said earlier, sales is a system, right? And if you really start to realize that, here's a system, it has roles. When we plug humans into those roles that work the system, things go really well. Now, things change, so we have to check the system and make sure it still fits what changed, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
sometimes the humans are the ones that have to change because they no longer believe in or can see the vision of the future. They were there at a time when we needed them and did a great job, but they're not going with us to where we're going next. So we
Yeah.
unplug them.
Yeah, and I think one of the mistakes that I see people making, and I mean, we're guilty of it too, was um, we hired a VP or like a sales lead before we had somebody to run sales enablement, because
Oh,
at some point you have to move from this like founder led sales motion where like all the knowledge, all the expertise is like kind of
right.
trapped up up here, and you have to start to like document that and then industrialize that knowledge out to both new as well as existing sales reps. And it's kind of like, if you don't do it that way, it's like building a house without having like really sound architecture plans,
Mhm.
which just
Yeah,
doesn't like, it doesn't make sense. And so when you start to think through the lens of like, well, sales is a system, the first part of the system is like, how strong is the enablement, right? Like, what are you teaching them, in what sequence? You can't overwhelm them, you
no.
can't underwhelm them. And then it's like, okay, they're now on board, they're having conversations. How well is the business instrumented, right? Like, how is your instance of Salesforce or maybe HubSpot configured? Are you getting the necessary data points to be able to make informed decisions and continue to improve after every single conversation? And one of the things that I saw back in 2019 is like, we had sales enablement, but we weren't necessarily utilizing them properly. Our Salesforce instance, we weren't tracking why we were winning deals, and
Oh,
then our tracking for why we were losing deals, it was all like BS excuses. Uh,
right.
so like none of it was actionable, and we had to like rip the band-aid off and make it so that like when we lost a deal or we won a deal, we knew exactly why, so we could like
Exactly. Oh my gosh,
analyze.
I can't tell you. So right, and so many companies, when I walk in the door to work with them, they can tell me why they lost deals, and they've got reason codes, right? It's in
Yeah,
Salesforce set up, and they're marked, and they can tell me how many they lost because of these reasons, and I'm like, "But what did you win and why?" Because you're usually most companies are winning more deals than they're losing, but they have no idea what the reasons are that they're winning, and so they can't leverage that, right? And if you know why you're winning and you're leveraging that, then you're losing less.
yeah,
It's
yeah. Sometimes it's product capabilities, sometimes it's um, the story gets
right.
stale, or whatnot. I think one of the things that we've seen is like, well, technology is constantly changing and evolving, and like, even if you do find product market fit, it doesn't mean like that's not a steady state. You can
No.
fall out of product market fit. And so by analyzing the feature gaps, like, yeah, it's painful to lose deals, but you also have to come to grips with like, nobody's going to win every single deal, like no company does. And so if you're going to lose, at least learn, right?
Yes.
Um, and so I'd say that was pretty transformative, because like one of the things that we did in back in the day was like we started to look at the real reasons why we were losing, not just like the excuses, and we started to see um, clear patterns as we started to deconstruct the numbers. And you have to cut the data a bunch of different ways. Cut it, by vertical, by region, by customer size, and like as we started to do that, we saw real pockets of strength and real pockets of weakness. And our takeaway was like, we were slow to launch a couple features that were contributing to like 80-ish% of the deals that we were losing. And so we needed to get like alphas or betas of those products into market as fast as humanly possible. And sure enough, we did. And it had a pretty transformative effect.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You've got data, but you're not really analyzing or getting any intelligence from it. When you're just using reason codes for lost, right? Lost deals, that's not helpful. When you can find the real reasons, then oh my gosh, we're losing them because we don't have this feature. We've lost how many now because we don't have that feature? Product development, get on that, right? We need that feature. It's just data that informs and it allows you to act, right? As we were saying in the beginning. So I think that's so important. So
Yeah,
just as we're wrapping up here, tell us what your sales organization looks like today. It sounds like you do have enablement, which is wonderful. A lot of companies, we went from having nothing to having some outside training to having people internally that did training to what is real enablement, not just the training, the tools, the onboarding, all the things that go with enablement to really help sellers sell, and analyzing what's working, what's not, and changing what we give to sellers, right? So it sounds like you've got enablement, you've got sellers, you probably have some sales leaders. Just tell us what your org structure looks like. Are there any customer support people or others that help with the sale and facilitate?
totally. And I just want to make like one more point on the
Yeah,
last. It's
absolutely.
it's important. It's really important to deconstruct the numbers that are either aggregated or averaged out. Like risk hides in aggregates and averages, so you have to de-average the number into very granular understanding. Um, so our sales org obviously consists of like the individual contributing account executives. There's a layer of sales management. There's a solutions engineering organization that helps them with demoing, whiteboarding, kind of creating the strategy around the solution that we're bringing to the prospect and hopefully ultimately the customer. There's sales enablement. There's sales or rev ops, which does a lot of that analysis that we were just talking about. Um, for us, we've gone kind of back and forth on like the customer success org at different points in time. They were part of the sales organization, and I think that can make sense. I think that um, uh, there's also an argument to be made that the customer organization at some point should be its own organization. Um, it's definitely something that we continue to try to optimize and evolve to this day. There is that kind of healthy tension that I think most enterprise sales businesses face, where it's like when it comes time, for renewal or upsell, if the salesperson hasn't been taking like an active role in managing the customer because there's been this handoff to the post sales team. What's their role? How do they get reintroduced? Should they even roll off to begin with? Um, and like I was saying before, in terms of switching from like regional to vertical, like you can't keep flip flopping. So it needs to be like a measure twice, cut once thing. And those are the major functions within like the sales organization. And then is making sure. Oh, sorry. And then there's an SDR team as well,
And
because
all of your teams roll up to a chief sales officer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we have regional sales management. There's department leads or function leads, and that all rolls into our chief sales officer.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, you've grown quite an amazing organization, and I'll agree with you on the customer success side. It's hard to really know where does it fit, right? And I think in every organization it's a bit different, but where I've seen it work really well is when you think of the life cycle of the customer from hello to I'm your loyal customer, and I repeatedly buy from you, and I will introduce you to people, right? It's
Yeah.
you've got them, right? So it's like Jocko van der Kooi talks about that bow tie versus a funnel, but it's got two ends, right? So it starts here, they come in, the close the deals in the middle, but then it expands out again because we're really nurturing them. We're really focused on the success of our customer using our products so that they want to continue using it.
Mhm.
And you do need customer success. You need customer support too, because you need somebody to solve problems, but you need that proactive, let me help make sure you really can be successful with that product. And then having the salesperson stay involved or having an account manager, if that's the case. Sometimes we have account executives and then account managers, but staying in touch at certain points. And I believe it has to be very prescribed. This is what the salesperson, whether they're the original seller or an account manager, this is what they do. This is how often they do it. This is how they do it. This is how they expand in the account. This is customer success's role. How they really focus on the success of the use of the product so they never want to switch off of it, right?
Yeah.
And how those two interact together and have discussions. And I really believe in this team approach where we're all working to make sure that customer is successful. So we're involved and understanding and knowing what's happening. And it makes the customer feel whole. It makes them feel like they have lots of touch points at a company. And it makes them know that we truly are concerned about their success. And so I think that's important to build that feeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the only reason businesses exist is to create customers and to create value for those customers. I forgot to mention, I think partnerships is the other
Oh,
really
yeah.
critical part of the sales system, because my view is that when people are buying anything, right? Like it could be clothes, it could be a car, it could be software. The thing that we all do implicitly is like we try to de-risk the decision, because
Right.
nobody wants to have like buyer's regret or buyer's remorse. So how do you help the buyer de-risk their decision, at least like in their mind? And I think that's one of the places where partnerships comes into play, because in our world, and I know in a bunch of different industries, there's a consultancy involved or an advisor or an agency or whatnot, and they may not be the final decision maker, right? But they're in the ear of the final decision maker, and if you can create that influence, you have to not only sell to like everybody around the table, you have to sell to the people that are standing behind those people at the table, telling them what they want to do or what they should do.
Yeah. Do your individual sellers also work with partners, or do you have like channel managers and people who work only specifically with partners?
It's both actually. So just given where we sit in the ecosystem, we have a bunch of technology partners. So our job is to again help kind of make sense of data and then to connect it to like a downstream customer engagement platform, whether that's like paid advertising or retention marketing, so on and so forth. Um, and so oftentimes our reps and their counterparts at these tech partners will share information around like, hey, what are you seeing here? Who are they talking to there? And it's all about like creating good karma, right? What goes around comes around, and finding partners that you can trust, um, because um, trust is easily lost, and it's a contract that has to continue to be renewed, and just the way that companies and markets evolve, I feel like some level of competition is going to be inevitable, even with like close partners. So how do you get through that? How do you create a win-win for the
Yeah.
customer? But then on the partnership side too, they're the ones really like laying the groundwork to establish that trust. And our partnership team works with both technology partners as well as solutions partners. So like the agencies and consultancies and boutiques.
Yeah. I think that every company that's selling business to business should figure out a way to find some partners. As I truly believe like you do that That's another great way in, right? It's somebody to introduce you. It's so much cold calling going on, so much cold outreach going on, right? When we
Yeah.
have introductions, like we started this conversation with why you built, this large group of people to help you who are just as invested in your success, right? As you were making those introductions, and I think partners can really be a great avenue for doing that. I'm a big believer in the channel. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I can't believe this time has flown by,
Yeah,
and
this
you
is
are
great.
an amazing CEO. You're the kind of CEO that I want to work for, if I was going to go to work for somebody, because you're really thinking about what you're doing. You're really making a difference. You really care about your customers and whether they succeed. So I know people can find you on LinkedIn, but I have a rule that if they're going to reach out to you on LinkedIn, they have to say that they heard you on my show so that you have some context, right, to know whether to accept their invitation or not. And then tell us where else you'd like to direct people.
Um, Usually Twitter, I guess. I'm at mcats0630. We'll see what happens with Threads if that continues to take off.
I just got on there yesterday for the first time, so we'll
Yeah,
see.
it's not bad. It's not
Yeah,
bad.
it
Well,
wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Didn't
it's
hurt too
growing.
much.
No, totally. It's just like one more thing we all have to kind of manage. But yeah, or just email me. It's mcats@mparticle.com.
Great. And of course, you can go to the website to learn more about what they do if it sounds like something that your company might need. So, Michael, thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to you again. In fact, I'm going to set up some time so we can talk and I can learn more. So, thank you so
Amazing.
much and have
Thank
a
you.
great day.
This has been awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.